If your chronic pain specialist isn't treating your gut health, I honestly wouldn't expect that meaningful of results because most people don't understand how much of their chronic pain symptoms are actually stemming from their gut health. And if you do have gut related symptoms, your chronic pain specialist is probably just sending you to the gastroenterologist who also isn't making that connection. So here's how it's all connected. So here we have your small intestine. The lining of it is just one cell wall thick. And those cells, which we call enterocytes, are closely packed next to each other, held together with what we call tight junctions. When you consume food and it starts to get broken down, those food molecules travel through your small intestine and then travel through one of those enterocytes where they get broken down even further. And those tiny food particles then enter your bloodstream where they get transported throughout your body. Well, now there's a phenomenon known as intestinal permeability or leaky gut. That's where those tight junctions actually break and those cells start to separate. So now, when food particles come in, they don't have to go through the cell anymore. No, they can go in between the cells. And that food, not being fully digested, now goes into your bloodstream where it gets transported throughout your body, but not without coming into contact with your immune system first. So your immune system, which I always like to visualize as little Pac-Man, kind of come through, but they don't eat the food. Instead, what they do is produce inflammation because inflammation is a signaling molecule to the rest of your body that says, hey, something is wrong. Let's put all of our focus, energy, nutrients here to fix this problem. Acute inflammation is one thing. You sprain your ankle, it blows up real big, you see it, you feel it, it's part of the healing response, it goes away once that tissue is healed. But we're not activating acute inflammatory pathways here, we're activating the chronic ones. And chronic inflammation, you don't see, you don't feel, it's just building up in the background over time, but wreaking havoc. It's actually a hallmark of all chronic pain conditions. So as long as this is staying active, we're constantly creating more chronic inflammation, but we're also keeping the immune system chronically activated, which is the basis for most autoimmune conditions. And this is why chronic pain and autoimmune conditions are so commonly found together. Now, this is just one of the 8 mechanisms behind how gut health affects your chronic pain. So keep watching. If your chronic pain specialist isn't testing for food sensitivities, they're doing you a huge disservice. Now, when most people hear food sensitivity, they're actually thinking allergy, and there's a big difference here. So in your immune system are things called immunoglobulins, and there's 4 of them: IgA, G, M, and E. A true food allergy is an IgE reaction. This is where you have more of an anaphylactic response. So it's immediate and there's no confusion about it. So you eat a peanut and your throat starts swelling or you get hives. That's a true food allergy. But a food sensitivity elicits an IgG or an IgA response. And this is a delayed response that you might not notice for hours or even days. And therefore, it's hard to pinpoint that that reaction is coming from not just a food, but a very specific food. Now, as we discussed in the last video, when you elicit an immune reaction, the very first thing that your immune system does is release inflammation. Now, if we continue to eat the foods that are creating that IgA or IgG reaction, we're going to start creating large amounts of chronic inflammation, which is going to downregulate opioid and NMDA receptors so that you feel pain more frequently, but it's also just bathing your nerves in an acidic environment that's going to make them a lot more hypersensitive. Now, the same 8 foods account for like 90% of all food sensitivities. Things like milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, soy, fish, and shellfish. But those aren't the only things that you can be sensitive to. You can have weird sensitivities to watermelon or chicken and just not even realize it without properly getting tested. Now, when it comes to testing, we start to run into problems here because if you go to your chronic pain specialist, they might not understand the connection between food sensitivities, gut health, and your chronic pain. Now, if you go to your regular doctor, they might send you to an allergist and they're going to allergy test you. But again, that's not what we're interested in. That's the IgE reaction. We want IgG and IgA reaction as well. So then you might reach to the test kit, the at-home test kit that you saw online. But the problem with those is the sensitivity and specificity tends to be really poor. So the test isn't reproducible. So if they test you once, they might test that same blood sample again and get completely different results. So we just can't trust that test. So the best thing that you can do is go to your doctor for a CLIA certified food sensitivity test that tests for IgG reactions. And if you really want the best, it has to test for IgG and IgA because you can have an IgA reaction without an IgG reaction or vice versa, and you might miss something that is contributing to your chronic pain. And just one more thing, food sensitivities are very common. Most people just don't realize they have them. There's never been an instance where I've tested somebody and it didn't come back with at least one food sensitivity. Now, sometimes you get the test back and it's like half the foods on that list are red flags. So what's going on there? It's not that you need to avoid all of those foods. It's more likely that you actually have an intestinal permeability issue, which we talked about in the last video, that is giving a lot of false positives to that test. So in the moment, you still are having a reaction to that food, but once you fix the intestinal permeability, most of those food sensitivity reactions actually go away. Your gut microbiome is the composition of all the bacteria in your gut, both beneficial and harmful. And those bacteria can be broken into two classes, Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. And when that is a nice, even balance, good things happen. But when that balance starts to shift and there's more Firmicutes than Bacteroidetes, we start to see issues, namely an increase in chronic inflammation, a decrease in neurotransmitter synthesis, a disruption of hormone production, but most importantly is the release of lipopolysaccharides, or LPS, which is an endotoxin released by those harmful bacteria. Now, LPS is harmful on its own, but it's amplified by intestinal permeability, which we discussed in the first video. And LPS also makes intestinal permeability worse. So we have this vicious cycle that keeps going round and round that's not being treated by your chronic pain specialist. So now when we have large amounts of LPS, that means we're producing pro-inflammatory cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, and interleukin 6 that don't just sensitize peripheral nerves and pain receptors, but they amplify central pain processing pathways in your brain and spinal cord that are contributing to the central sensitization that we keep talking about over and over again. So you don't just have gut symptoms, you've got widespread pain far from your gut that you aren't realizing is coming from your gut. When that balance of beneficial to harmful bacteria in your body is just right, those beneficial bacteria ferment the fiber that you should be eating. Well, let's be honest, chronic pain sufferers typically aren't consuming enough dietary fiber, and convert that fiber into short chain fatty acids. So fiber is the prebiotic that feeds your microbiome that then creates postbiotics. And those postbiotics are the short chain fatty acids butyrate, acetate, and propionate. Butyrate is the main fuel source for your colonocytes, the cells of your large intestine, but they also help upregulate tight junction proteins, so we're less likely to have that intestinal permeability that we talked about in the first video that's been driving everything that we've been talking about since. Acetate goes right to your liver and gives it more energy to help detox environmental toxins, so less inflammation and oxidative stress comes from that. Propionate goes to your liver once again, but helps with glucose metabolism so that we're not creating as much inflammation or advanced glycation end products from that as well. Collectively, short chain fatty acids help boost immune function. They help decrease food sensitivities, help decrease chronic inflammation, help improve insulin sensitivity, and help increase mineral absorption like magnesium. These is all stuff that we've been talking about in past videos. So I'm hoping that you see the interconnectedness of everything that drives your chronic pain and is keeping you in that state, but have a further appreciation for why your prescription painkillers just aren't working as you hoped. There's a single line of communication between your brain and your gut, and that's cranial nerve 10, or your vagus nerve. You probably heard about it. It's a parasympathetic nerve, meaning it's part of your autonomic nervous system, that branch that's dedicated to resting and digesting. And the interesting thing about this nerve is 80% of its job is afferent, meaning it's collecting signals from the periphery and sending them up to the brain. So wouldn't we want those signals to be calming? So if this vagus nerve now comes into contact with inflammation from the gut, lipopolysaccharides, things we talked about in the previous videos, it now sends danger signals up to the brain, specifically to the periaqueductal gray, which is a really important region in the midbrain for chronic pain sufferers because it's responsible for threat processing and survival behaviors. This region is significant because when you activate the periaqueductal gray, you decrease descending inhibition, the mechanism by which your spinal cord filters out all the incoming signals, only allowing the truly painful things through. So if we activate the periaqueductal gray, we essentially open up this gate, allowing all signals to get through. So this is why we experience more pain than we should, and pain to things that shouldn't be causing pain, all because of your gut health and this vagus nerve. Not to mention, this is the same mechanism by which your emotions drive chronic pain, how fear, anxiety, and catastrophizing thoughts actually increase pain, whether there is physical tissue damage or not. Your microbiome, the composition of beneficial and harmful bacteria in your gut, are directly involved in the synthesis and regulation of neurotransmitters that are critical for pain modulation. For starters, about 90% of your body's serotonin is actually produced by cells in your gut, and those cells are regulated by your gut microbiome. So it's nice to have a little extra serotonin around. It might lift your mood a little bit, but serotonin also modulates peripheral pain receptor sensitivity and central descending inhibition. Additionally, gut bacteria also produce GABA, dopamine, and norepinephrine. So when we decrease that, we lose descending inhibition. So again, we're opening up that gate, allowing more signals to get to the brain to produce chronic pain. Now here's the kicker. Normally, the amino acid tryptophan gets converted into serotonin in your body. But with gut dysbiosis, that pathway crumbles, and instead, tryptophan gets shuttled to the kyuranine pathway, which creates quinolinic acid. The details aren't that important. But what you need to know is that quinolinic acid activates the NMDA receptor, which is the most important receptor in all chronic pain conditions that we talked about extensively about 2 weeks ago. When that receptor is activated, it drives central sensitization, which drives all chronic pain conditions. Now, magnesium and vitamin B6, they both help decrease quinolinic acid, but we're looking at the wrong source. We need to start down here where the gut dysbiosis is actually occurring. This is a lot of ways that your chronic pain is being driven, especially by something that your specialist has never even addressed. Casual reminder that your gut and your chronic pain are not two separate things. A nerve injury in and of itself can cause dysbiosis, the balance between beneficial and harmful bacteria. When that imbalance happens, your microglia get activated. Your microglia are the primary immune cells of your brain and spinal cord. When they get activated, they do the only job that they know how to do, and that's to produce inflammation, in the hopes that the rest of your immune system comes and fixes the problem. But in the meantime, or with chronic microglia activation because of chronic gut dysbiosis, all that inflammation starts to build, which sensitizes nerves, but also influences that NMDA receptor on your spinal cord. So when that gets activated, we open up the gate, all the pain signals are free to come through so that you're experiencing more pain than you should and pain to things that you shouldn't be experiencing. You want to make your opioids both safer and more effective? If so, we have to look to your gut health. Now, I understand that opioids might be the only thing that helps your chronic pain. We have to understand that in the long run, they're going to make it worse through opioid-induced hyperalgesia, and this is how it happens. No doubt about it, opioids slow down your bowel movements, which is not just an inconvenience. With that, we end up with dysbiosis. So now we have more harmful than beneficial bacteria. And with this shift, we have less short-chain fatty acid production, which is necessary to maintain the structural integrity of your gut barrier. Now, all those harmful bacteria are producing lipopolysaccharides, which translocate from your gut to your bloodstream, where they activate pro-inflammatory cytokines, which do their job to produce inflammation. That inflammation then desensitizes the opioid receptor, so they just don't work as well, but it also decreases the amount of those opioid receptors on your nerves. With all this inflammation, we see an activation of the NMDA receptor, which non-chronic pain sufferers have this gate in their spinal cord that's regulated by this NMDA receptor. It keeps insignificant pain signals from making its way to your brain. But chronic pain sufferers, that receptor gets activated, that gate opens up, and now every pain signal, whether important or not, makes its way to your brain. On top of that, we see an increased synthesis of glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, just amplifying your pain further. There is less GABA production, which keeps this whole process in check. And now you just have to take more and more opioids to get the same effect. That's called tolerance.